A rack, an awl, claws, stun gun, welding machine. They cut my tendons, bioted me with a knife, ordered me to speak a dictated text on camera. And years later, they remember every second they spent in the dungeon cells of the secret Mariupol prison. This memory lives in the bodily scars and in recurring nightmares. They put a bag on your head, tied it with a tape around your neck, and when it's however long you can bear it, you bear it. Where were women, men there? I just can't remember how many anymore. Really, the brain human, it blocks some things out. Some had physical injuries, some had their stomachs ripped open, some had their throats cut. In August 2014, a senior employee of a metallurgical plant, Mikhail Shubin, was returning from his shift, but he never got home. Ukrainian security officers forced him into a car and started beating him. Mikhail woke up in the terminal of the Mariupol airport, where for 2 weeks we were trying to beat confessions out of him. It got to the point where I and my comrade Oleg, God rest his soul, and I took the arch supports out of his shoes and wanted to cut our veins with them, because we just couldn't take it psychologically anymore. Hundreds of people like him have spoken of torture before, and experts have written about it in their reports. But Kyiv denied that the security service of Ukraine had an involvement in the torture of people. But this week, former employee of SBU Vasily Prozorov confirmed that there really was a torture chamber in the Mariupol airport. In jargon, it was called a library, the detainees were called books. People were interrogated here in the utility rooms, the boiler room, the storerooms. If they didn't make repairs there, you would even see blood soaked into the concrete. And all the walls were scratched by the nails of detained people. It really is creepy, it really is a real concentration camp. Prisoners for this bloody library, according to Prozorov, were regularly abducted from towns and villages by fighters of the so-called volunteer battalions. They also had secret prisons for their own, of which the official Kyiv and the security service of Ukraine were fully aware. The fascist swastika on the walls of the school in Lysychansk was left behind the Tornado Battalion fighters. Here they committed tortures, rapes and murders in the school classrooms and in the basement. The Azov and Aidar fighters were accused of similar cruelty, but only the Tornado men ended up in the dock. The former lieutenant colonel of the security service of Ukraine explained the reason behind this. Since the beginning of 2015, a powerful vertical axis of corruption had been built in the ATO area, starting from the bottom and reaching the administration of President Poroshenko. It consisted of illegal transportation, moving across the demarcation line of various goods. When the tornado appeared, who thought that they also should secure a slice of this pie for themselves? The name Prozorov used for the nationalist battalions was Monsters, and the parent who spawned them was the former leader Valentin Nalyvaiko. It is thought his initiative that in 2014 weapons and kill orders were essentially given to yesterday's criminals, and they were led by Verkhovna Rada deputy Volodymyr Parasyuk, who personally confessed to Lieutenant Colonel Prozorov about Maidan executions, whereas deputies Igor Mosychuk and Oleg Leshko didn't mind participating in the torture themselves. Igor Hakimzyanov passed through their hands in the parliament. Here he is already half-dressed, bruises on his body, and under interrogation by People's Deputy Lashko. Can I loosen the handcuffs a little? It's impossible, we live in a free democratic Ukraine. What the Ukrainian democracy should look like, this was spelled out in the official documents of the SBU, which were shown to the journalists by a former employee. It seems that Kyiv never ever considered a peaceful solution for Donbass. Even civilian casualties, regardless of gender or age, were recommended for public justification. They were accomplices of the occupiers and therefore not worthy of sympathy. In this context, is it any wonder that a paratrooper wears an SS chevron on his uniform at a meeting with the president, or that a Marine battalion commander hangs a portrait of Nazi Otto Skorzeny in his office? This is not my government. When I became aware of the nationalist, even Nazi, anti-people coup in Kyiv, I decided to fight this power by any available methods. Throughout these 12 years of operational work in the Zaporozhye department of the SBU, Lieutenant Colonel Prozorov was engaged in a fight against banditry and drug trafficking. In 2014, he was sent as an expert consultant to the so-called ATO zone. Definitely at this time that Prozorov began to cooperate with the Russian special services. For obvious reason, the Lieutenant Colonel did not specify what exactly was included in his tasks. He only hinted that he had repeatedly meddled the plans of his former colleagues. Such was the case with the live news journalists Marat Sajenko and Alexei Dakin. They were detained near Kramatorsk in May 2014. There was the deputy head of the Special Operations Department of the ATO headquarters, Colonel Dmitro Kobets, who prior to that had worked in NATO Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan for a year. And he was seriously suggesting that come morning we should leave your colleagues on their knees under the scorching sun, bags on their heads, their hands tied behind their backs, and keep them without water, without food, without anything. According to Prozorov, foreign instructors have been teaching torture methods to Ukrainian nationalists since the very beginning of the conflict. He personally saw special permits issued to them for visiting military units. Western curators were allowed to enter the building of the SBU itself. There was information that only foreign militaries, particularly American militaries, work on a separate floor of the SBU headquarters. Is this true? CIA officers are present in Kiev and they simply reside in safe houses in the suburbs. They often come to the central office of the SBU, but their purpose is, for example, to hold specific meetings, planning specific operations. In 2016, British MI6 representatives, I believe, Charles Beckford and Justin Hartman, paid a visit. Lieutenant Colonel Prozorov also told reporters about Kiev's involvement in the Malaysian Boeing crash in Donbass, the high-profile murders of leaders and commanders of unrecognized republics. A special subdivision of the SBU was recruiting previously convicted local residents to participate in sabotage missions. They were trained to work with explosives, and in 2017 such training ended with the explosion of the car that was transporting security officers. Through the media, the militia soldiers were blamed for everything, and Prozorov was ordered to forget the true version of the events. He left Ukraine about a year ago, but he still assures us that there are still many among the law enforcement and security officials who do not share the ideas of Euromaidan and who will not protect its leaders and the cost of the lives of their own citizens. The example of the Lviv Berkut that was forced to kneel in front of the people is a very, very powerful example. No one has forgotten this. The moment will come when the police and the National Guard will say, "No way, we're not going anywhere," so that they can't make us their scapegoats again. Vasily Prozorov gave us this interview just as Ukraine was celebrating Security Service Officer Day. Their only response to their former colleague's revelation was only a short post in the social network which, of course, denied everything. United Nations comment was also limited to a dry phrase: "We know about tortures and have been demanding a thorough investigation for a long time." Apparently, they have not insisted too strongly. After all, official Kiev has been simply ignoring all the reports on torture for 5 years now.